All right, guys, welcome back to Engineering Major, Philosophy Minor. EMPM, of course, is the channel where you can get a working aerospace engineer's opinions on topics pertaining to engineering, philosophy, politics, and various other social issues. Hope you guys are having a good Saturday morning. Um, I'm laughing a little bit right now because last night I actually watched President Trump, so you can see it up on the screen here. I watched his address to talk about the coronavirus vaccine and talk about coronavirus updates. And he said something super funny about New York. Now, I get that maybe this wasn't the most appropriate thing for Trump to say. He's kind of being an a-hole. But the one thing that I have enjoyed about President Trump's term is that he oftentimes will call out people in the media. He'll call out governors. He'll call out even people within his own administration. And it just makes politics like very entertaining. And I know that a lot of people hate that, but let's just kind of set the stage. So, both Trump and Cuomo, obviously from New York. And so if you think about them as just kind of like characters in a sitcom, which obviously the coronavirus situation is a lot more serious than that, understandably so, and people might get upset that I'm commenting on this in this way, but it's funny to think about this in terms of here are two politicians just kind of taking shots at one another. But the really funny part is Andrew Cuomo's response. So that's what I want to share with you guys in this particular video. So we're going to hop over to Wolf Blitzer and Andrew Cuomo and show you guys something pretty funny that happened. Okay, so let's watch a little bit of Wolf Blitzer. We'll do a little bit of a reaction to this too. I've got to pause the video so I don't get copyright strikes and stuff like that. There's a couple key things that Mr. Blitzer says, and then we'll get to the really funny part here.
Just a little while ago, President Trump wrapped up his first public remarks since his election defeat with...
So right there, Wolf Blitzer immediately says, wrapped up his public remarks since his election defeat. Of course, the media has predicted that Joe Biden will be the president. I sort of suspect that Joe Biden will be the next president. Trump is taking advantage of the legal system in this country and not conceding right away. And I don't say taking advantage in the sense that he is trying to game the system or anything like that. These are the legal rights that are afforded to him, that he can challenge election results.
The coronavirus update in which he attacked the New York governor, Andrew Cuomo, by name. Governor.
So Wolf Blitzer then says that Trump attacked Andrew Cuomo, and that makes it sound like there was like this physical altercation. There's this really bad thing. Trump basically just said an a-hole remark. Of course, the 75 or whatever million people that voted for Joe Biden are going to consider it an absolutely a-hole remark. And probably a lot of the 70 million people who voted for Trump are going to consider it an a-hole remark. I think it's an a-hole remark. I just happen to think that it's pretty funny what he said. So we're going to hear that in a second.
Governor Cuomo is joining us now. His new book, by the way, is entitled American Crisis Leadership Lessons from the COVID.
Of course, there's a plug for Andrew Cuomo's book. Leadership lessons. Maybe at the end of this video, we'll take a look at New York's coronavirus stats. And I don't necessarily think that when you look at the data, you can really claim that Andrew Cuomo had that great of leadership. But anyway, he wrote a book.
COVID-19 pandemic. Governor Cuomo, thanks so much for joining us. It was pretty extraordinary. The president took direct aim at you in his remarks in the Rose Garden. I want our viewers...
I want you guys to look at the look on Andrew Cuomo's face, because he has this look on his face like, yeah, we're two New York guys and we're taking shots at one another, and I'm a little bit worried what's going to happen in the next couple of seconds, because I think that I may have gone back and forth on my word on something and Trump called it out appropriately.
To watch. Listen to this.
As soon as April, the vaccine will be available to the entire general population, with the exception of places like New York State.
With the exception, oh my God.
Where, for political reasons, the governor decided to say, and I don't think it's good politically, I think it's very bad from a health standpoint, but he wants to take his time on the vaccine. He doesn't trust where the vaccine's coming from. As soon as April, the vaccine will be available.
So just to give some quick context to what Trump is saying before I know that a lot of people, especially the media, are going absolutely nuts over this, and how could Trump do this? And he's such an a-hole and stuff like that. In that same speech, Trump basically just says, "Look, Andrew, if you just give me a call, we'll work it out." And Trump's very serious in his delivery of this, which I think is kind of impeccable from a comedic point of view. I really think that if Andrew Cuomo was to just call up Trump and be like, "Okay, but can we seriously work something out?" Like Trump would probably work something out. But let's hear Cuomo's response.
To the entire.
So how do you respond to that? A personal attack going against you, threatening the people of New York State. They might not be able to get the vaccine because of comments you've made.
Because of comments Andrew Cuomo has made. We're going to look at those in a second, too.
Yeah, well, first of all, luckily he won't be here, right? But
Are you sure about that, Andrew Cuomo?
look, what the president says is just untrue. At one time, a statement like that would almost be incredible.
Oh, it's just untrue. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. Or let's have a listen and a look.
So the first question is the vaccine safe? Frankly, I'm not going to trust the federal government's opinion.
Oh, what was that? Oh my God. Let's go ahead and listen to that again. Let's listen to that a couple more times.
What the president says is just untrue. Frankly, I'm not going to trust. Just untrue. It's partisan and it's question. But look, frankly, I'm not going to trust the federal government's opinion. What the president says. But look, the people of this country don't trust this federal government with this vaccine process. This is just untrue. So the first question is the vaccine safe? Frankly, I'm not going to trust the federal government's opinion.
Okay, so we heard that little segment. Andrew Cuomo says it's not true that he didn't trust the vaccine. And of course, we saw that he literally said that he doesn't trust the vaccine. And he claims further that New York doesn't trust the vaccine. And he cites a bunch of mainstream media sources that are talking bad about Trump and the vaccine process as his evidence that Trump is in fact politicizing it and not Andrew Cuomo. Well, now we've got the vaccine, bud. And it's looking pretty good. So basically, are you going to administer it to your people or not?
But with this president, it's common. Here are the facts.
Let's hear the facts.
We trust the drug companies. Pfizer is a great New York company, actually.
Oh, do they trust? So they trust the drug companies, and Pfizer's the one that put out the research, and Pfizer's the one that did all the test results, and is working through the FDA approvals right now. In Cuomo's other video, he says he trusts the FDA. So why does it? What does Trump have anything to do with it?
Regeneron is a great New York company. What the American people don't trust is President Trump. And
well, you don't have to trust President Trump because he's not the one, again, who's going into the lab and mixing up the chemicals, right?
every poll has shown, Wolf, yours included, that over half the American people are afraid that they politicize the approval process of the vaccine.
Oh, all those Democrat polls, huh? Well, how many times have we seen those be wrong? A lot.
For political reasons during the campaign. So we're in a situation now where half the people in the country are saying, I don't know if I should trust the vaccine. A number of states, New York included, but a number of states set up a separate scientific panel.
Oh, there's going to be a separate scientific approval process outside the FDA. So I want to take a second to go ahead and talk about something that happens in engineering, particularly in when dealing with government regulatory agencies. So there are two products that the U.S. Makes a lot of or produces a lot of that have extremely ridiculous development timelines. And of course, one has a lot more development timeline than another. But so commercial airplanes are one thing that have an extremely long development timeline. That's because they're subject to a lot of scrutiny by the federal government Rightfully so, they should be. Obviously, we've seen companies like Boeing have problems. There have been accidents where people have lost their lives. So commercial airplanes is one product that takes a very, very long development time because there's a lot of government approvals. Same thing is true with pharmaceuticals. In fact, pharmaceuticals and vaccines and things like that take usually an extremely long time to develop. And part of this is because there's a lot of federal regulation, a lot of federal requirements that you have to get through, rightfully so. So in the last several years in commercial aviation, commercial aircraft manufacturers have gotten a lot better at handling the FAA regulations. They've dealt with the regulations for some time. They're able to take approaches and streamline the process to creating commercial airplanes in order to meet these regulatory requirements. And by the way, companies that produce commercial aircraft outside the US, for example, Airbus is a good example, also are subject to all of the requirements of the FAA. Now, what happens sometimes is that there is a huge committee of people on the business side, on the company side of things, and then there's a huge committee of people, obviously, in the government, and they will get together and they will negotiate and discuss which rules are out of date, which rules need to be updated, which rules are redundant, etc., etc. Now, I'm just going to go out on a whim and suggest that the FDA approval for therapeutics, pharmaceuticals, vaccines, etc. is the same exact way. So when Andrew Cuomo was talking about politicizing the process, what is probably happening is the White House task force led by Mike Pence, and perhaps even Trump himself is involved in a lot of these discussions, but probably not a ton. And of course, Trump's whole team of advisors and advisors from Pfizer, guys on the business side, and guys from the FDA side are all together in a room, and they're probably going through each regulation line by line and trying to figure out which regulations are redundant or which regulations are excessive or which regulations do not apply to this specific product. And they're basically just striking those out because they're not relevant. Now, that's not politicizing. That's called improving the process between government and business in order to get things done quickly. Because what always happens when the government comes in is it slows things down. Now, the converse of that is when the government gets involved, usually they try to do the best they can to make things more safe. Fair enough. But it also adds development time, and it usually adds a lot of redundancy and adds a lot of red tape for things that don't necessarily apply to that product. And this happens in commercial aviation all the time. There's plenty of requirements that just straight up do not apply to whatever aircraft is being developed, but you still have to provide some evidence or some justification as to why to meet those requirements. And there's back and forth constantly. I mean, I've been on the phone, I've literally been on the phone with people from our suppliers in Japan, suppliers in India, guys in the US, and members from the certifying authority or designated representatives from the certifying authority, and we've debated over these small little clauses for literally months. That's not politicizing. That's called trying to improve the process so that we can deliver something helpful to the American people in record time. But Andrew Cuomo will never talk about that. He actually wants to set up his own task force so that after all that approval happened with the FAA and all that nice process happened with the FAA, all that efficiency gained is just going to go right out the window with Andrew Cuomo's special thing.
That will review the FDA's approval to give people confidence in the approval process. Ours is headed by a Nobel Prize laureate.
Oh, okay. It's headed by a Nobel Prize laureate. So, all that work that the FAA did with the coronavirus task force and Trump and stuff like that and Pfizer, that's not applicable. We just have our own agency. Okay, Andrew Cuomo. Come on, man.
To establish the credibility that they don't have in President Trump because they believe he politicized the health process.
Well, in Andrew Cuomo's other video, he says that he completely trusts the FDA. I don't understand why Andrew Cuomo thinks that Trump is literally just directing the FAA, FDA. He just completely took over the FDA and is calling the shots and just striking out requirements with a red pen and just throwing it at people's faces. I mean, come on, man. This is a team of people.
That will actually help build confidence in the vaccine And that's what we're going to do. It will run simultaneous with his process. So as soon as the FDA approves it,
So wait. Listen to this.
it will run simultaneous with his process. So as soon as the FDA approves it, we'll have our panel approve it. 7 other.
Well, hang on. That's not simultaneous, Andrew Cuomo. That's not simultaneous, right? The president has the FDA approve it, and then you approve it after that. That's not simultaneous.
Other states will review it. And then I can say to the people of New York, I know you were dubious, but we had a separate panel review it. It's safe. Take it. Because if we have a vaccine that people don't trust, it doesn't accomplish anything anyway, Wolf.
Well, actually, it does accomplish something, because if you say 54% of people don't trust the vaccine, then the other 46% of people who do trust it are just going to take it. I mean, that's good, right? Why would you deny it to that 46% if just the majority says that they don't want it? Well, fine. If you don't want it, don't take it, right?
Well, how much longer do you think it would take? Let's say the FDA, the federal government, approves a new vaccine and it's immediately available, especially to older people, healthcare professionals, people with underlying health conditions, and it's immediately available, let's say in New Jersey, but not available in New York. How much longer would it take for your review to allow it to go forward to the millions of people in New York?
Finally, Wolf Blitzer asks a tough question of somebody on the Democratic side. Now, this isn't exactly that hard of a question. In fact, Andrew Cuomo should be pressed even harder on some of the things that he's saying, and he should actually be called out by CNN for going back on his previous word, as we saw previous in the video. But thank you, Wolf, for at least asking the obvious question. Now, let's see what Andrew Cuomo has to say.
There will be no delay.
Oh, there'll be no delay. What?
Our review will be simultaneous with their delivery.
So you're telling me that the FDA approves it and the delivery trucks start rolling out. And Pfizer apparently has a facility in New York. So I'm sure that they've already got pallets of this stuff sitting on a truck, probably not sitting on a truck, but it'll get put on a truck right when approval happens and will get distributed immediately that day in New York. And you're saying that in that same time period that it takes the truck to drive from Pfizer and deliver a thing to Walgreens or something like that, you're going to have your second FDA approval process completed, or your secondary approval process completed. By the way, it's going to take the FDA probably like a week to go through this approval process. Okay.
And again, there are 7 states that are doing this. And by the way, it has to be done because you have half the American people saying they don't trust the approval process.
Oh, it has to be done because half the American people say they don't trust it. Well, I mean, it doesn't have to be done for the other half. I mean, look, I want more than anything for people who are vulnerable to get vaccinated. I would love it if my parents got vaccinated. Maybe that would abate their fears a little bit about the coronavirus. They're obviously a little bit older. They have a little bit higher risk, obviously way higher risk than I do. I mean, if they don't want to take the vaccine or whatever, I mean, I'll take the vaccine, because what that means is then I can go visit my parents without having to worry about all this crap, right? So of course, what always happens, with the Democrats is, they just say, well, if we can just show a majority of something, then that means that, it's not actually beneficial for, everyone, right? And we've seen this with the election. They want to get rid of the Electoral College because they think that if you just win the popular vote, that'll be good for everyone, and it just doesn't work that way. So I don't understand what Andrew Cuomo is talking about here. So that's all we're going to watch from this. And why don't we just go ahead and take a look at some of New York's coronavirus statistics, and I think we're going to see some pretty interesting things. Okay, so here we are looking at just the data straight from Google, just typed in New York COVID stats, and we can look at new cases over time, and this is over all time, and we can see that there is this nice big spike right here, almost up to 12,000 cases a day. And then the spike came down. Now New York is starting to see a spike again. Now, the media talks a lot about cases, but what I think is really important is to look at cases in relationship to deaths. So let's go ahead and look at deaths. So New York had this giant spike in deaths. It peaked at about April 10th, let's say. And then it came down, and there's some kind of data anomalies here and here. Look at what's happening here. Deaths have started to go up a tiny bit, but not a ton. Now remember, deaths are a lagging indicator. So the people who, unfortunately passed away on April 9th were probably infected about 4 weeks prior to that. So let's say they were infected on like March 9th-ish. So all those people who passed away were probably infected in this region right here. Now, I was having a discussion with my dad about this. We were looking at the death curve, and I was making the point that if you wanted to pursue herd immunity, New York kind of did that on accident. And my dad really did not. My dad is pretty, at the moment, pretty staunchly a Democrat. And my dad really didn't like this comment. And he said, let me explain to you what happened. So I said, okay, explain to me. So he said, we started the lockdowns, and all the people who decided that they still wanted to go out, went out, and then they all started dying. And then look, the lockdowns worked because the death rate came down, and then they've been locked down this whole time, and so there haven't been any more deaths. So I said to my dad, you make an interesting point. And what I have done is I have tried the best I can to kind of superimpose these charts of cases and deaths right next to each other so that we can make some nice comparisons. So I said, that's an interesting point, except after death spiked, we continued to get a lot of new cases, and then cases settled down. So if the lockdowns worked, how come you still continued to get cases? And if you still continued to get all these huge cases right here, how come you don't see the deaths continuing to be high about 4-ish weeks after that? Now you can say, well, look at these big spikes, Alex. This is the deaths, right? Now perhaps that's possible, but these are certainly also, it's also possible that these are data anomalies, right? These are deaths lumped in that should have been recorded across this time period, and there was clerical errors or something like that, and they recorded them here and here. I don't really want to get too much into that, but then here we see that cases started increasing kind of back here in October. They're really starting to take off now, but deaths did not increase by all that much over here. So it's very likely, and this could change, this isn't fact, but it's very likely that what happened is everybody who unfortunately was at risk and vulnerable got it back in this area. We continued to have cases, but all the cases were of people who were not as vulnerable. And then right now, the people who are getting it over here hopefully are not as vulnerable. And so the deaths are not going to spike as drastically as they did back here in April-May timeframe. Andrew Cuomo, of course, got a nice little plug for his book about how well he handled coronavirus. Let's go ahead and take a look at Sweden's coronavirus statistics. Remember, Sweden decided to pursue herd immunity. So Sweden had a nice big spike in deaths, and then it went down. New York had a nice big spike in deaths, and it went down. Now, Sweden, if we look at cases, Sweden's been having this huge number of cases. So the question then becomes, well, are the deaths really going to spike? They actually had 0 deaths on November 12th, so that's good. They had a small uptick in deaths here, obviously not as bad as back here, but we'll see if this holds, and if all these new cases are just people who are younger, who are not as vulnerable, and it's just because it's winter and everybody has to stay inside and it's circulating. I'm going to go ahead and conclude the video there, guys. I hope you guys got a nice little laugh out of this like I did. Unfortunately, I think that the claim that Andrew Cuomo, handled this the best of anyone in the country, is not really a claim that one can stand behind. I think that just by pure accident, New York ended up in a quote unquote herd immunity situation. Plan for the worst and hope for the best. Andrew, I think you just gotta call the president and get your people some of that vaccine. If not the 54 or whatever percent of people who don't want it, administer it to the 46% of people who do. I still think that that would be a big help. I'm sure there's at-risk people in that 46%, and yeah, I think you got to give the president a call, bro. And I think you got to start being a little bit more honest about your position on things. So that's going to conclude the video, guys. Leave a comment, like, share, subscribe, thumbs up, whatever you guys want to do. I really like the comments because it's something that I can interact with and respond with. But again, I'm just a random engineer talking about stuff on YouTube. Have a good weekend, you guys, and I will catch you in the next one. Later.